This is a response to Brendon Tomasi, who uploaded a series of videos reflecting on what I had to say in response to David Long, who was trying to upgrade Integral. And Brendon asked if I literally meant to imply that David Long was somehow like specifically trying to to trigger me with his video, and no, that's not the case at all. David and I don't really have much of a history before this. I was somewhat familiar with his work. I'd seen a couple of his videos, and we're in some integral, chat rooms in different places, and but we never interacted directly. And so, really, I mean, poor David, I was really just butting into, wedging myself into his attempt to kind of rebrand integral or to resuscitate the integral brand, and bring it in a certain direction. And I kind of felt like it was a direction that was unnecessarily reactionary, against the spiritual pole of the integral structure of consciousness. Because I think integral spirituality is a thing, and it requires that we remain open to, for example, um, the possibility that consciousness is not merely an emergent product of the brain, and that um, it requires, I think, if we're going to remain integral, and this is the point, right? I wanted to wedge myself into the rebranding operation that David was attempting in order to say, hey, wait a minute, actually, integral needs to include this over here. This being the spiritual side of things. And David's calling for realism, and I think that that's great. But his realism sounds a lot more like materialism to me, um, and I think there's much to be learned from a quadratic, sort of crucifixion of the cosmos into quadrants that allow us to gain insight into the various modes of existence that uh, this thing is able to uh, take on and enter into. And I think a good way of understanding what it means to be integral is to look at Rudolf Steiner's 12 worldviews, where there's four quadrants, right? And I'm gonna just talk about the two axes here, and the top is spirit or spiritism, and the bottom is matter or materialism, right? That's the vertical axis, and the horizontal axis is idealism and realism, or ideas and reality. And the thing about these two axes with four poles is that materialism is not the same as realism, right? That's the first thing to point out. And there's a way in which realism, often in our materialistic cultural context, realism ends up being imagined in a more materialistic way than it needs to be. Realism is still the opposing pole with idealism, in the sense that there's a tension here, and the idealists tend to emphasize the importance of inner soul drives and purposes and ideals, whereas the realist tends to emphasize the importance of um, you know the conditions of the whole situation, and the environmental influence, the encompassing situation. And the, there would be no way really to understand reality if we were to just accept one extreme or the other, to say that, oh, well, really all of reality is constructed by these internal ideas, or really all of reality is constructed by these external circumstances. Both are operative in the process of the production of reality. Um, and really, I should say, I prefer, again, as I'm going to drop the name Alfred North Whitehead, when I talk about reality, I really, if I were being more precise, I would call it creality, as in, reality is not some solid ground or finished foundation. Reality is not a foundation, but a fountain. It's a creative advance. It's an advance into novelty. Reality is a process of becoming, of creative becoming. So it's a creality. And whatever reality is, right? It's both lured into the future by ideas and pushed from the past by realities, by the objectively immortal facts of the already actualized past, right? Reality is the creative repetition, the creative recapitulation of that past, launching it into a future where, the future as we perceive it is ontologically distinct from the past. I think when we're properly integrating idealism and realism, right? It's like ideas are effectual, not so much in the present or in the past. When we look to the past, when we look to history, it's like, oh, the conditions. You always attend to the conditions when you look at history that were causing the situation to occur, right? It seems more inevitable when you look at history. But when you are in the present, imagining the future, there's more of a sense of openness and of possibility. The past can't be changed. The future is open and changeable. Ideas are effectual in the future, not in the past. You know, Forces, material conditions, economic forces, social forces are what seem to shape history. But ideals, aims, values, these are the things that shape the future. And not just in human societies. Ideas are operative in the pre-human world. There is no doubt about it. If they're operative in human beings, they're operative in all of nature, because we are just a creature of this creative cosmos. We are not some anomaly here, and there's no way for something like scientific knowledge to have just accidentally emerged from a collection of randomly colliding atoms. So there's clearly a form underlying the appearance of chaos. There's clearly an ideal order operative at the very heart of things, real things, that the concrete, like, external circumstances of the public facts of our shared existence are orchestrated by underlying rhythms and harmonies and patterns of potential. Whitehead calls these eternal objects. And these potentials are effectual in a different way than actualities are effectual. So, we just need to be able, I think the whole point here is that to be integral means to be able to hold these two aspects of the process of reality in mind, rather than having to sort of fall into the obsession with either one and the sort of polemical opposition of one to the other. Like, clear thinking requires being able to incorporate, to include the insights of realism and idealism as attitudes toward the world. And materialism and spiritism, these two are poles that we might want to try to integrate, but we'll save that for another time. You were mentioning that, I don't know David's work that well, and I really do need to, I look forward to talking to him more, and I need to watch more of his videos. But you were saying, he says idealism is fine, religion is fine, as long as it's poetic. But he makes this distinction between poetry and science and knowledge about nature and stuff, and logic, and So it's like he's almost belittling idealism by saying, "Oh yeah, it's great as poetry." But I think the point for the idealist, for the realistic idealist, if you were, which is, for me, I don't know if I'm an idealistic realist or a realistic idealist, but um, I I think it's not just that idealism should be poetic; it's that reality itself is poetic. Nature is divine poetry. Nature is uh, art. And when we as human beings enter into the mode of consciousness that makes us sensitive to the experience of this fact, that nature is art, when we allow ourselves to become sensitive to that, we are participating in the divine creator of that art. And we ourselves are, in fact, that creator. And human beings and all creatures are, as Tolkien might say, sub creators. We are co workers with the divine artist in the creation of this reality, in the ongoing creation of this reality. Now, God has more persuasive power than the rest of us, but we're also, you know, part of the democracy. There's a democracy of fellow creatures. I love the way you said that science is, how'd you put it, the democratization of knowledge or something. I was almost going to say the democratization of initiation. That's what science is. And in this way, science isn't somehow set apart from religion, as if religion's for the idealists and science is for the realists or the materialists. No, science, when done well, is motivated by the religious impulse to know and understand and praise the mind of God, and also discovers the um, inscriptions of that divine um, power. It discovers in nature as if nature were a book written in spiritual script. It discovers, science is able to discover God in nature. And so, in this way, I think we really need to avoid the polemic right now. Science and religion are compatible with one another, and it's not just because religion is poetic and science is factual and literal. It's that nature itself is a poem that we can learn to read and participate with in creating something novel. And we want to participate with nature as a work of art, as co-workers with God in its creation. We want to participate with it in ways that is respectful of the habits that are being inherited, of the ecological situation, and of, like, the real evolutionary possibilities. And, like, let's move forward together in the co-creation of reality in the most attuned and deliberate way that we can. And, like, that's what science is, and I think also that's what religious practice is. Um, so I hope I addressed most of what you were inquiring into there, Brendon. Yeah, and I think, idealism and religion are actually very practical. Brendon, you mentioned that David likes to say that if idealism is practical also, that it can, we can bring it in, but the problem is he thinks it's usually not. But I would say, religion and idealism should be ritualized, and they should be embodied in sacramental practices. Like you were talking about Pythagoras and the sort of sacred geometry, and that these geometrical methods where you draw the dots and create these forms, that's actually a ritual technology. And it's altering consciousness. So the practitioner of this geometric art is altering their consciousness, becoming attuned to a subtler, um, you know, order present in and shaping all things. Um, and so, yeah, rediscovery of the sense in which um, religion and religious cosmologies and all of their symbolic and mythic and poetic grandeur are actually meant to be taken literally in the sense of um, practice the rituals. Like religion isn't trying to communicate information to us; it's trying to transform us. Religion isn't about information. It's not knowledge in that sense. It's not granting us access to data in the divine mind. Religion is more about becoming someone new. It's more about that metanoia, that transformation that changes the very basis upon which you might even interpret any data to begin with, and gives you new eyes with which to see the world and a new heart with which to feel it. So religion's about transformation, and if anything is more practical than the transformation of human hearts in terms of its worldly effects, let me know about it. Because I think that actually genuine religious transformation and mystical insight is very practical. Um, and if these ideas are not leading to insight and transformation, then we're doing it wrong. So, yeah, just more thoughts, more grist for the mill. David and I are going to have a conversation at some point in the next week. I hope so, to be continued.